Good afternoon, everyone. Before I begin, I want to sincerely thank the AMAC Academic Advisory Board and the AMAC community for your support. Your support through this scholarship has made it possible for me to be here today. It has been nearly a decade since I last attended an international conference. So this opportunity to present our research and to learn from leaders like you is truly invaluable. So thank you so much. Steve Jobs once said, great things in business are never done by one person, they're done by a team. This research is no exception. I would like to acknowledge the collaboration and contributions from my co-authors, including Katarina Wolf from Curtin University, and my two industry colleagues, Ian Waller and Caitlin Gillis-Wan. I thank them for their insights and collaboration. Let me start with a personal story. Growing up in Hong Kong, I was taught that my school marks defined my worth. Metrics were everything, and these follow me into academia. A world whose value is defined by metrics such as the number of publications, the number of citations, the amount of grant funding, teaching evaluations, and industry engagements like this. This list generated by Copilot pretty much summarizes what I need to achieve to demonstrate my value as an academic. These metrics help us align with institutional goals, but they also create pressure. When the benchmarks are set based on the median, that is the median number of publications, the median amount of grant funding within the same department, half of us are always below average, and half of us always fail to meet the benchmarks. Because it's really difficult to achieve the median benchmarks across all these criteria, the performance evaluation system constantly challenges our sense of self-worth to some extent, but it also encourages us to pursue improvements across these different criteria. Because I recognize the importance of metrics to help my students prepare for their future careers in communication, I often ask my industry colleagues, what are your individual performance metrics? Their answers usually focus on capabilities, so things like writing, strategy, and creativity. But capabilities are more about what they do rather than what they achieve. So I asked Copilot to generate a list of performance metrics for communication professionals. And unsurprisingly, they are team-based, output, and outcome-focused metrics. They don't really reflect individual performance. It is difficult to evaluate individual performance in a team-based environment like the communication function. So research on strategic management has argued that we can only measure covariance between individual performance and team outputs under two conditions. First, if an employee has the authority to lead a team, we can attribute the team outputs to his or her leadership. And second, if we can rotate an employee among the different teams, and we can see that those teams' outputs change because of the employee's presence, again, then we can tell that it is that employee that makes a difference in a team. But these conditions are not easy to implement, so we still cannot find a way to attribute team metrics to individual performance. With these challenges in mind, our study explores two specific research questions. First, what criteria are used to evaluate individual communication professionals? Individual performance metrics are defined as quantifiable measures used to evaluate an employee's productivity, efficiency, and contributions to an organization. And second, how do organizations evaluate alignment or misalignment between employee performance and departmental or organizational performance? The concept of vertical alignment in strategic management highlights the importance of aligning objectives from top to bottom and vice versa. In other words, organizational objectives should guide the development of communication metrics, and communication metrics should guide the development of individual metrics. So we began our journey of inquiry with a literature review of existing research in communication measurement and evaluation. First and foremost, Professor Jim McNamara here wrote in 2015 that despite 50 years of research on M&E, there was a deadlock in M&E research. There are three specific problems. First, most M&E research is dominated by quantitative methodologies, so there is a lack of deep insights. Second, there is a focus on cost-to-effect relationship from inputs to outputs and outcomes. And lastly, we know that communication activities contribute to organizational outcomes. But there is a lack of studies on the mediating factors that influences the process. Therefore, Professor McNamara wrote that further research and rethinking are required to get to the bottom of the M&E dichotomy and identify a circuit breaker to resolve the deadlock and establish a pathway to progress. To establish a pathway to progress, other researchers have highlighted what current research has not yet addressed. So Dr. Alexander Buchman and Fraser Likely found that current models on M&E have not explored the assessments of the internal structures, resources, and processes that enable communication activities. That is a big blind spot. And this has guided us to study the concept of alignments as a condition within internal processes that enable communication activities. To situate alignments within existing M&E frameworks, we argue that alignment is an essential condition within inputs. So although inputs are typically understood as the quality of messages or the channels chosen for those messages, inputs also refer to the resources needed to facilitate the outputs and the outcomes. So inputs aren't just about messages and channels, they also include resources and systems, and crucially alignment as well. However, Dr. Sophia Falk found from her systematic review of 324 research studies that only 4 studies have examined inputs. Therefore, we advocate for the consideration of alignment as an element of inputs, and alignment is an essential process that enables communication activities. Alignment is more than a buzzword. As Dr. Sophia Falk and Professor Ansgar Servas argue, it is a strategic concept that connects management, strategy, culture, and people. It is a glue that holds communication efforts together. So they explore different types of alignment, including process, structure, culture, people alignments, strategy alignments, and activity alignments. And in strategic management, alignment is an ongoing adaptation process that is dynamic. It should be manageable and measurable, and alignment makes a significant impact on organizational performance. So this framework highlights the central roles of human resources in supporting the communication function. And this leads us to study the concept of organizational alignment in human resources. In human resources, alignment has several meanings. First, it recognizes the existing fit between goals and objectives within individuals, teams, departments, and the whole organization. Second, human resources serves as alignment mechanisms, integrating employees' roles and job responsibilities into departmental processes. And lastly, organizational systems, procedures, and routines need to be linked with job specifications, responsibilities, and criteria. Now, reflecting on these as an employee or an employer, to what extent does your organization currently measure and manage alignment? So to date, within the communication field, there is very limited research that shows how alignments, such as vertical alignment, vertical goal and objective alignment, is measured and managed. To gain a better understanding of employee performance and organizational alignment, we conducted interviews with industry professionals in Australia. So we use LinkedIn advertising to send message ads to members of Communication and Public Relations Australia. Communication and Public Relations Australia is the industry association in Australia. We recruited 22 participants and interviewed them online. 22 is probably not enough, so we recruited 6 more participants within our own networks. About half of the participants were working in-house, and half of them were working in agencies. And the years of experience range from 4 years to 40 years. The interviews were then transcribed and analyzed using thematic analysis. So we began the interviews by asking them some general questions about the metrics for the communication function. So there are some examples here. The quantitative metrics are not surprising, but there are some qualitative metrics as well, including stakeholder feedback, case studies, lessons learned, and crisis management. As expected, agencies emphasize short-term output and outcome objectives for their clients, whereas those who work in-house emphasize cumulative impact, such as positive perceptions and positive stakeholder experiences. Then we asked interviewees about individual metrics, and we found that these metrics vary across different levels. For early career professionals, their focus is on supporting activities and outputs, and their work is more task-focused and learning-oriented. So to put the evaluation criteria in the language of measurable metrics, these are some examples: whether they can complete tasks accurately and on time, whether they can gather necessary information for the teams, the number of training programs that they engage in, the number of tasks they can manage at the same time, and whether they are responsive to feedback. So whether they accept the feedback, whether they reflect on the feedback and change their actions accordingly. For mid-career professionals, their focus is on balancing execution with planning. And compared to early career professionals, they have more responsibility in generating the team metrics. So sometimes their performance is defined by campaign outcomes. So we can see that their individual metrics are more closely aligned with the metrics of the communication function. And to put the evaluation criteria in the language of measurable metrics again, these are some examples. So in terms of resource allocation, whether they can use the least resources to achieve optimal outcomes, how well they manage the budgets, whether they can deliver a campaign or communication program within a given time frame, how well they engage with stakeholders, and in terms of innovation, whether they are able to generate new ideas and the effectiveness of those ideas. And the last one, effective collaboration, is probably both a capability and an achievement, and it can probably be informed by qualitative data, such as stakeholder feedback. In fact, like a lot of these evaluation criteria actually need to be supported with qualitative data. And for senior professionals, senior level professionals, their focus is on strategy, leadership, and crisis management. And if they're in agencies, they are also responsible for retaining clients and attracting new clients. Compared to mid-level professionals, their individual metrics are even more closely aligned with the team metrics or the metrics of the entire communication department. For example, they were evaluated based on whether they contribute to organizational growth, how well they manage reputation, etc. And here's the challenge. Many of these evaluation criteria are not quantifiable measures, and they blur the line between what someone does and what someone achieves. For example, is enhanced relationship with stakeholders a skill or a result? It is a bit of both, and it can be very hard to achieve. And based on these findings, we can see that as communication professionals move upwards in their ranks, their individual metrics become more closely aligned with the team metrics or the departmental metrics. So we also explore the processes of employee performance assessments. As expected, the performance metrics are written based on the job descriptions. The interviewees emphasize that these metrics need to be co-developed through collaboration between employees and the line managers. So employees need to rate their own performance, and they also need to provide feedback for the organizations that they work for. They are required to provide anecdotal accounts of their experiences. 360 feedback is encouraged. So 360 feedback is multi-source, multi-rater feedback. So inputs are collected from multiple sources, including employees, peers, subordinates, supervisors, and external stakeholders. And the interviewees also emphasize the need to collect soft data, so data such as eagerness, passion, and respect, because these soft data provide insights into whether employees culturally align with their organizations, as well as the stakeholders that they serve. So, how is alignment assessed? One of the research participants said, yeah, most organizations measure teams. So we found that alignment is mostly self-assessed. That is, employees need to actively advocate for their own achievements to ensure visibility and advancement opportunities. So they need to align their core values with the organization's goals. They need to serve as enhancers of organizational culture. They need to build quality relationships with internal and external stakeholders. And they need to balance collective success with individual recognition. So in an ideal world, organizational goals should inform the collaborative development of communication metrics, and communication metrics should inform the co-development of individual metrics. And there should be a bottom-up process as well. So some interviewees emphasize the importance of being self-reflective and also asking themselves how organizations can support employees in achieving their individual goals. And there are some ethical challenges. Alignment is not always ideal, and there are two examples in here. First example, deliverables are very central to performance evaluations. Communication professionals determine how to manage work processes and resources to achieve the deliverables. But in agencies, the number of clients managed can be an important performance indicator, and managing too many clients leads to burnout for individual communication professionals. And second, some clients pursue self-serving or even unethical objectives, but client satisfaction and retention are important performance indicators. Therefore, it can cause moral dilemmas for employees. For example, one specific example that was mentioned was that in financial public relations, some clients want to promote their new financial products, but those new financial products are very risky. So it is important for communication professionals to disclose the risk, but it can cause problems for client satisfaction. So these are real dilemmas. Based on our findings, we make 3 recommendations. First, engage employees in creating shared understanding about organizational objectives, and also in developing communication metrics, team metrics, and individual metrics. Performance assessments are often a top-down process, primarily aimed at controlling employees. However, literature on human resources management shows that when employees know that what they do contributes to the team and the organizations, they find their value and they become more engaged. So the concept of employee alignment in human resources emphasize that the systems need to instill in employees an understanding of how their work contributes to organizational goals and priorities. And the interviewees in this study have emphasized the importance of the human elements in the process, so employees' perceptions of alignment is essential. Recommendation number 2, we need to complement hard data with soft data. So in human resources, credible measures need to be observable, measurable, and also demonstratable. In communication, we have hard metrics even for individual employees, so hard metrics such as efficiency and accuracy. But again, the human elements and the anecdotal data are also critical. So there should be a more holistic approach that includes self-assessments, peer assessments, and assessments of the organizations and agencies that they work for. So we need a broader view of performance. And we need to acknowledge the role of interpersonal dynamics and the cultural fit of communication professionals within the teams. And our last recommendation is that we need to develop context-specific approaches to assess alignments and review them regularly. So there are currently no standards on how to measure fit between individual performance and communication metrics and organizational goals. We just know that individual employees and their line managers have some responsibilities in the process. So employees need to advocate for themselves to demonstrate their alignment with their organizations. And the line manager need to create systems and approaches to ensure that the metrics are aligned. And our study found that the measurement of fit is often value-based. For example, one of the research participants, who is an agency owner, emphasized that a clear growth trajectory for employees is an important metric for both individual employees and her agency. So she kind of uses individual metrics to inform the agency metrics. Again, this reflects that alignment is a dynamic process. Before I close, I would like to leave you with more questions to think about. So the HR ecosystem framework shows that HR fit and alignment is at the meso level that mediates between activities in the micro level and the macro environment. As a communication function, we might not overstep into the responsibilities of human resources management, but we need to be aware that this meso-level system is an important element of inputs for communication activities. So we also need to keep in mind that alignment is not static. It changes. Some days we feel aligned, some days we don't feel aligned. And that is okay. Misalignment is not necessarily a failure. It is a signal. It can drive growth, innovation, and change. But if we position alignment as something that we want to achieve, employees would have a tendency of presenting data that shows alignment. They would be refrained from reporting misalignment, and this can hinder organizational growth. So the real question is, do we currently have systems to evaluate employees, to support alignment, to measure it, and to act when it is missing? Thank you so much again for this opportunity to present our research. Thank you.
Fantastic. Do we have a question for Lisa? We have time for one. The overwhelming demand. Go ahead, Stuart. Microphone coming.
No, it was really interesting. But one of the kind of things that I was thinking about when you were talking is how the work you were doing can map to the Global Alliance's Global Capabilities Framework.
Yes. Yes, so we looked at the capability framework before we conducted these studies, and here we found that like even capabilities are actually evaluated, and individual employees have different benchmarks for evaluating these capabilities. So it would be great if we can actually map some of the evaluation criteria into the capabilities, so that would be our next step.
Brilliant.
So thank you so much.
Google is your friend to be able to see all of the other things that are working. Amazing. Thank you so much. Another big round of applause for Lisa, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much.